Hello everyone! Welcome to TERF WARS Season 3, Episode 10, which is pretty exciting, I think. So, for anyone who's new here, TERF WARS is the show where we go through the last week's worth of gender critical, TERF, transphobe, general nonsense against trans people, and we look at the arguments together and we debunk the arguments. We often laugh at the arguments, and then they're dealt with and we can move on. We can move on to next week where there will be just as much bullshit, because there is constant bullshit all the time at the moment because we're living through a trans panic, which is very tedious if you're a trans person, and actually very tedious if you're a cis person, because we're all fucking sick of hearing about it now. Anyway, in this show, I go through and I've found screenshots from various places, largely Twitter, where I live. And in lots of cases, I've censored them. And that is because these are just random people, and we're just addressing their arguments. We're not here to do a pylon or anything like that. That is not the point of this show at all, and I do not want you to do that. And if I catch you doing that, I will block you. So don't go and hunt these people down. In this episode, there's actually quite a lot where I haven't censored them, and it's because it's relevant who they are. It's either because they're an organisation or an important voice in the gender critical movement, are a lot of the ones from this week, and it's relevant who they are. And it's important to highlight sometimes. We'll come to this more later, but it's important sometimes when we're just picking all these random people, it can be very easy to say, oh, well, you're looking for the worst arguments. I mean, you're not looking for the best gender critical arguments. So sometimes we wanted to say, well, here's your best. Let's talk about them. So we're going to go through a load of stuff. We're going to start with the news as usual, and then we're going to talk about the exciting things that have happened this week. And then we're going to get onto the brainrot section, which is everyone's favourite / least favourite. And then we're also going to have a small mailbox opening session at the end. If you want to stick around, which you don't have to do, that's totally cool. But yeah, so let's move on to what's going on. The first thing that happened, which is quite exciting. So last week we briefly covered the Olympics and we talked about Laura Hubbard, who unfortunately did not finish in her event. But we get to celebrate something really exciting today, which is Gwen, who is a non-binary person who's the first publicly out trans person to win a gold medal at the Olympics. And they were competing in the women's football for Canada and got a gold medal, which is amazing. So well done, Gwen. I think, quite a lot of people were pleased by this news. Some people didn't care because some people don't care about sports. Some people don't care about trans people, whatever. But you all know exactly what's coming. We all know what's going to come, because anytime any non-binary person or trans man does anything, everyone gets angry at trans women. Now, I'm not trying to say that non-binary people or trans men are immune from transphobic bullshit. Absolutely not. Not at all. But most people are angry at trans women, or the concept of trans women, and that's who they get angry about every time. So last week we had quite a few conspiracy walls, and today we have an idiot wall. There was literally thousands of comments like this. All this kind of oh, why is it only ever male to female athletes? Oh, we're cheat. If you can't play with the boys, then you play with the girls? All of these people thought that Gwen was a trans woman, because of course they fucking did, because they're all stupid and they didn't spend even 1 second. I quite like the first one saying, why is it only ever male to female athletes, when they're talking about a non-binary person who wasn't assigned male at birth. So maybe the reason is because every single one that you look at, you assume is a trans woman. But I just highlighted some more hilarious ones over here. One of them saying, hold on, he identifies as a man and is still allowed to play on a women's team. This is becoming so confusing that only college indoctrinated lunatics can justify this. I thought that was a great like way of phrasing I'm uneducated and confused by simple concepts. That's another good one over here. We should have sent our top trans women team, aka the men's team, like Canada did, instead of kneeling lesbian second stringers cheaters. Maybe all of the people who are into football in the audience know what that means, but I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And then this one saying trans. So many people love talking about trans people by just saying trans, as if that's like the noun for trans people. Like this person says, trans are ruining sport. Like that's not grammatically correct. So it's quite frustrating already. But also, trans are ruining sport. Quinn is an undersized trans female, but what is she was 6'2". So getting the wrong pronouns even when they're trying to like suspect on their pronouns. But also, I mean, what if Quinn was 6'2"? What if? Who knows? I get the feeling that they would probably be worse at football, seeing as the men's team isn't full of 6'2" men. And there are 6'2" women, and they don't seem to play football. And whether a non-binary person is 6'2" or not, and trans are ruining sport. What, the first ever time that any trans person has achieved anything in the Olympics, and suddenly we've ruined sport? Standard garbage. But this one was my favourite. That I saw. I mean, there was I had a whole folder of these, and I just included however many made like a square here because I couldn't be bothered to edit anymore. I could have done like 3 more pages of this. This person says, "Oh please, pretty certain trans women have been competing as females for decades. Just open your eyes." Then they've included 4 cis women, 3 of whom just happen to be black. Who are muscly, and I think having muscles means that you're a man now. So, congratulations to everyone out there with muscles on finding out that you're actually a trans woman. It's all right being a trans woman. Could be better. This is called transvestigation, and you see this all the time. From as soon as women achieve anything that's like strength based or endurance or that kind of like extreme sort of top level sport, there's someone accusing them of being a man, and especially if they're black people, or especially if they're black women. That's what I mean. Which is disgusting, and it's just part of the general trans panic that's going on. And I think we might see an example of this later. But anyway, here's a nice picture of Quinn with their trans flag and the rainbow number 5, which is the position they play in. Apparently, I don't know. A football position's like, does 5 always play in the same spot? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So that's a good smile, and I think well deserved. Well done. Oh yeah. Okay. So here we have one other Olympics and trans panic themed thing. So this is from African Sports Today, saying former Polish sprinter Marcin Urbas, perhaps, has requested Olympics organisers to run a test on Nambian teenager Christine Mboma, sorry if I got that wrong, who's 18 years old, to find out if she is a woman after she ran a semi-final time of 21.97 seconds in the women's 200, which is a very good time. There's so much of this going on at the moment, accusing high performing women of being trans women or just of being men. And this happened in the 80s. There was a small panic about it, and they started doing all these horrible internal genital inspections and stuff, as if that would prove someone wasn't a trans woman anyway. And it is just factually often targeted at black women, and it's linked into this ridiculous patriarchal beauty standard, which is very focused around white straight cis women. But I think it's just worth being aware of this bullshit that's going on. At the moment in the Olympics, it looks like for some things it's getting better. I mean, we just saw Laurel Hubbard compete, so you know the rules haven't got, they got slightly more restrictive since 2004, but they've not got so bad. But we also then have this situation where Caster Semenya, who's also a black woman, has been banned from competing, and the reasoning behind that is bullshit. So there's still going to be more of this going on. Yeah, bullshit. And so I've included this at the start. It's a bit of a change of pace from the athletics we were just talking about, but I just think it's important to highlight. It's one of the news items I wanted to talk about. So this is a poster about a lady called Sophie Gwen Williams. I'm just going to read it out, and it's very sad and very sickeningly infuriating. So the poster says, when Sophie died last week, she had been on an NHS waiting list for 5.5 years, waiting for a first assessment at the Gender Identity Clinic. On moving to London from Belfast last summer, she was told by the staff at the GIC that she was to wait a further 4 years for her first assessment. On May the 20th, 2021, our darling Sophie took her own life. Losing Sophie is a personal tragedy, but it is also a public disgrace. How is any working class trans person supposed to survive nearly a decade amid a maelstrom of gender dysphoria and the repeated mental health crisis that it brings on? It's a howling injustice. The staff at the GIC failed our best friend and creative soulmate. They failed Sophie, and now we will never see her again. We are asking them to do better. I mean, firstly, this is incredibly sad, and love to all of Sophie's friends and family who are missing her. It's horrible to lose a friend. But also, they're completely right. It's absolutely disgusting that it's disgusting that someone should have to wait 4 years, which is the smallest of the 3 numbers on that page. 4 years for a first appointment. We're not talking about, genital surgery, which does require world-class experts. And there are not an unlimited supply of world-class experts. And genital surgery is not cheap. If we were saying, oh, there was a waiting list for 4 years for getting genital surgery on the NHS because of a mix of funding and staffing, that wouldn't be good enough. But that might be, the only thing we can do without changing how the NHS works or training up lots of people. That would be an argument. But when it's the first, for the first appointment, so the first appointment you get nothing. But shortly after the first appointment, it's ridiculous to say the word shortly when you're talking about trans healthcare. Probably within a year of having your first appointment, you might get to see like a counsellor or a doctor who could potentially prescribe you hormones which cost pennies, doctors which can, prescribe trans people. There are some trans people who might need a more in-depth prescription, diagnosis and prescription process. For example, children or trans people who aren't sure. But if it's someone who's been out and living full time for 5 years, it is not a difficult diagnosis process. And then it costs pennies, and anyone can do it. And they could be training up loads of counsellors. It's just disgusting. It isn't just underfunding. It's structurally designed to slow trans people down. There were loads of trans people, for example, me, who arrived and I'd already done everything. I'd already, started hormones. I'd already legally changed my name and all my details, and I'd already self-ID'd my passport. And I'd, done all the things they're looking for transition, apart from some surgery things. And still I had to turn up, use up a whole appointment slot and they said, fill in this form, we'll see you in 6 months. If everyone has to do that, then that's wasting appointment slots that other trans people like Sophie could have been using. But I had to go for it because it's, I went through the fastest you can possibly go through the system. And it was still pointlessly slow. There were so many steps that just did not need to be there at all. Disgusting. And she is not an outlier. There was recently a freedom of information thing which we covered in a previous episode for Exeter GIC, which is just, I mean, when I went, it was the fastest one when I was looking at all the different GICs to go to. And they had like an average waiting time of something like 4 years, and the longest had been 6 years, and they had only got through like 10 people in 1 year or something. It's disgusting. It's absolutely, this is standard. Waiting 5.5 years today, it is the norm. Disgusting. So let's get our spirits up a little bit because that was very heavy. We're now going to change pace a little bit. So just send some good vibes to, Sophie's friends and family, and store some of your rage. And then afterwards, perhaps write a letter to your MP, find some campaign group, make a difference. But we're going to clear our minds now, and we're going to move on to something different. So over the last week or 2 weeks or something, the Gender Critical has held some talk somewhere. I think this was a Posey Parker Standing for Women event. And this was one of the speakers. And I think we should all just listen to what this person had to say. I actually wanted to include them last week in my conspiracy theory focused episode, but I forgot. So now we're going to enjoy them today.
I believe that we're all in danger from the whole big government. We're not being run by our governments anymore. Okay, what's happening is global. So I just want to say something that just helicopters out. Why are they pushing? Why have they co-opted the whole gay rights thing? What's going on with that? And I'd just like to say something that I think it might be to do with, and not everyone's got onto this. It's called transhumanism, right? It's called transhumanism, and the reason why they want to divide everybody, right, look at BLM, Antifa, they're all backed by George Soros. It's to make the divide between black and white. Now they've co-opted the gay movement, and people that legitimately find that they're not living in the right body, good for them to make the decision that's right for them, and I support them in every way. But to bring it down to kids being kind of pushed towards this. I saw a mum a while ago, I said, how's your daughter? Oh, well, she identifies as a boy now, so it's a they. And we're talking about 15-year-old. And I was kind of like, that never happened in my day. What's going on with this? And the transhumanism thing, I just want to warn you, this mRNA, DNA altering experimental treatment that across the world, they want every single person in the world to take this mRNA treatment. They are calling it a vaccine, but it's not. It's a DNA altering treatment. And guess what? There's a Supreme Court ruling in America done in 2013. So they planned all this, where if your DNA is altered, you are no longer human. So beware. The transhumanist thing, have a look into that. There's a very good person called William Henry on Gaia TV who talks, has got some really interesting talks into transhumanism. That's what got me onto it. And now I've started to look into the patent stuff that's going on around the whole corona.
Oh! Oh no, I shouldn't have pressed back. Can I go forwards twice? Yes, I can. That's good. Sorry. Mate, what the fuck was that? So, I noticed that she got in the Jennifer Bilek transhumanism conspiracy theory, which Jane Claire Jones has also pushed. The idea that, well, depending on who you ask, some people, largely who just happen to be Jewish billionaires, are trying to sell transhumanism for some reason via creating trans rights to trick people into supporting it. And it's somehow related to the coronavirus, and the vaccine is actually altering your DNA so that you're not human anymore. And they've done a law saying that. What are you talking? Like, that got a cheer. that was like an invited speaker at this event. I just look at it. I want more people to see this kind of thing. Like, they had a very small audience there, as we saw. And that's kind of disappointing in a way. Like, I wouldn't want there to be a big crowd all there, like, turning up to see this thing, because that'd be terrifying, because it would show that loads of people had lost their minds. But, you know, show this stuff to people. What is this? It's just, how has this happened? How have people lost their minds so much? It's like QAnon level stuff. I mean, this really is just straight up QAnon level mad conspiracy theories. Learning about transhumanism on Gaia TV and assuming that, like, oh, your friend's son has come out as a trans man, a trans boy, and you're like, oh, this didn't happen in my day. Well, what are the options? One, LGBT people really stigmatized when you were younger, and so now they are less stigmatized. More of them are coming out, or maybe you just didn't know one by chance because we're still quite rare, or maybe some billionaires are trying to sell the idea of transhumanism for reasons, and this is part of it. And so is the coronavirus vaccine for some reason. Ugh, painful. Anyway, on to something else ridiculous. Candace Owens, who is an American conservative commentator, says, I can't believe I'm tweeting this, but they are pushing the trans agenda on children via Muppet babies. This is sick and perverted. Everyone should be disturbed by predatory cartoons meant to usher children into gender dysphoria. Bring back manly puppets. Oh, God. So, sorry, I've got a flipping cat hair stuck to my nose. Oh. Sorry. So anyway, let's watch this video and see what sick and perverted things are going on in Muppets Babies. This is going to be sick and perverted. Are you ready?
Our royal ball. We met the most amazing princess, but they ran away, and all they left behind was this.
Everyone, there's something I need to tell you. The princess who came to your ball tonight was me. I'm Gonzarella.
But Gonzo, why didn't Vu tell us?
Because you all expected me to look a certain way. I don't want you to be upset with me, but I'm...
So that was the clip she provided. Poorly cut. So it's a kids show where there's a Muppet that's supposed to be a boy who wanted to dress up as a princess. And then all the rest of the Muppets were like, that's cool. And that's sick and perverted, is it? What are you on about? Man, American, like, far-right conservative stuff is just so detached from anything that I can get my head around. Who gives a fuck if a boy wears a dress? Like, honestly, what is wrong with you? But I do actually think this is great. I don't know who this dude down the bottom is. I assume that's like Candace Owens' friend or something. Anyway, this is great. Like, we never had anything like this when I was back in my day. And it would have made me feel great, you know, seeing them just being like acting normal to some boy who wants to wear a dress, because then maybe I would have had the courage to ask to do it. So shout out to the Muppets. That was, I mean, from that little 5-second clip, that was good. So, and also shout out to Gonzo for living your best life. Gonzarella. But we've got another Candace Owens thing. And she was being a prick to Serena here, who I all recommend you follow. She's great on Twitter. So they were arguing about vaccines. So Serena had said, Candace was like, I'm not going to take the vaccine. And then they were arguing over that. And Serena says, you're delusional for not wanting to take the vaccine. And then Candace Owens has to deflect, because you've always got to deflect when you're wrong. And she says, just want to make sure that you are a trans woman telling me that I am a delusional person because I choose not to get a vaccine. You believe that between you and I am living a delusion. Is that correct? So here she's nearly 7,000 likes. Pretty grim. She's very popular. I think she's got like 2 million followers or something. So here she's trying to do this. You can't be right because you're a trans person, because all trans people are delusional. So there's obviously lots wrong with this bullshit take. Firstly, even if someone did have delusions about one thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are completely untrustworthy on all things. You know, if someone has, for example, body image issues and they think that they're a lot fatter than they are, that doesn't mean that they're not qualified to talk about vaccines. So that's already nonsense. Secondly, trans people aren't delusional. That's just false. And thirdly, like, we're talking about vaccines. We're not talking about like something that's debatable. So yes, Candace, this is a shout out to you. Just going straight out to Candace, who I'm sure is watching this. I am a trans woman, and I'm just going to tell you that you are delusional for not getting the COVID vaccine. So, fuck you. And shout out to Serena for taking a flack of a 2 million follower dickhead account, quote tweeting you several times in a row. That must have been pretty bullshit. I actually got quote tweeted by Lauren Southern last week, and I thought it was going to be really bullshit because she has loads of followers, but not really much happened. I think I ratioed her. She did not get 7,000 likes, that's for sure. And, 800 retweets. Anyway, moving on. So this was one of the big things I wanted to talk about this week, and I considered making it the title, but we'll get to that in a bit. So here is Laurie Penny, who has been engaging with gender criticals for a little while now, asking some questions. And they did not like it. And we got to see quite a few answers. And I think it was very telling of the entire gender critical movement. And this is what we're going to look at now. So anyway, she has said, I'm fascinated to know what sort of world gender critical feminists would like to live in, ideally. What would gender identity look like? What would be acceptable way for, say, someone assigned male at birth who did not want to be a man? If someone felt that they didn't fit within the categories of male or female, what would be the best way for them to live their lives in the better world that the gender critical feminists imagine? So, as you're all, of course, expecting, we got lots of good faith replies which engage directly with the question and the arguments presented. Lol. So it was all fucking garbage. She got ratioed. There was a lot of replies to this. They really don't like her at the moment, so they went all in. Of course, there was loads of insults and loads of calling horrible things and loads of just ridiculous replies and deflections, things that didn't make any sense at all. But we're actually going to ignore lots of those. We're going to look at the majority, like mainstream gender critical reply to this. And I think this one kind of sums it up, as we will see. They've said, gender critical, the clues in the title. Ideally, there'd be no gender ID. It's a concept which puts a lot of unnecessary pressure on young people. There should be women and men with no sex stereotypes to conform to, or not. Dress, behave, and love however you want without labels. So, in the dream gender critical world, part of the things they've said, there should be no sex stereotypes. Good. You should be able to dress, behave. Obviously, good faith here, we're being good faith. Behave within reason. Like not go around punching people. And love, again, same. However you want without labels. Like, that sounds pretty close to my dream world too. No sex stereotypes. No stereotypes at all. Like, we don't want racial stereotypes. We don't want, like, you know, any other stereotypes. And people can do what they want within reason. I think that sounds great. But they've included another bit, which is the core of gender critical. I think, you know, most people who aren't dickheads would say in their dream world, there'll be no stereotypes and people could do what they want. But the important bit here, which I think is worth highlighting over and over again and sums up the entire of gender critical, is in their dream world, there would be no gender identity. And what this, like, there's more than one way to read that, I guess. But the way it's, which is almost certainly intended, and we'll see that from all the other replies, is that they think that gender identity is part of sex stereotypes. And they want a world where that wouldn't happen. You know, they want... But, well, I mean, straight up what they're saying here is they want a world without trans people. I mean, that is literally what is being said here. You know, in one sense, if there was no gender identity at all, then people would just be born with the bodies they have, and that would be that. And we know that's just factually not the case. You could say that, I guess if I was being super charitable, maybe they were trying to say a world without gender dysphoria. And that would be a good world in one, you know, potentially. I don't know, it's complex, but that isn't what they're saying. What is going on here is they're saying, I don't want trans people, and I think the trans people are just part of sex stereotypes. And you see gender critical people say this all the time. It's absolutely not a straw man to say they think that trans people are just... Oh, there's so many cat hairs in here. Ugh, sorry. It's not an exaggeration at all to say they think that being trans is just a reaction to sexism. And this is a point that I pointed out a lot to them, and I confront them a lot. Because if being trans is a reaction to sexism, then there are actually more than one causes for trans people. Because there are trans men who want to be men to escape the sexism that women face. Like, that is the bit that fits most with their worldview. If there were only trans men and all of them were saying they hated being women and they just wanted to get away from it, then that might make sense. But that isn't the case, because, you know, there are also trans women and also non-binary people. And so they then have to come up with another reason as to why trans women exist, because it doesn't really make sense if you're saying people, you know, trans people exist because they're trying to escape the sexist pressures on women. So then they say, oh, well, you know, some men are gay and they face a lot of pressure from the patriarchy too, so they're trying to escape it in a way they can by becoming straight. But then there are other trans women too who aren't only attracted to men, so they must be something else, so that they must be a fetish. So then you have at least 3 causes for being trans, but then you also have like non-binary people who were born as boys. And in the case of those, it can't be like a sexual fetish for being a woman because they don't want to be a woman. And it can't be trying to escape by, you know, fitting into a box because they're specifically not doing that. So then there has to be another cause. So then they have to say, oh, well, that's like some trendy thing for some reason. So then you end up with like 4 or 5 different causes for what being trans is. And it just happens that the science shows that the treatment, like there's similar ways to diagnose all of them, and the treatment like works the same way. Like it ends up being like the absolute opposite of the Occam's razor view of where trans people come from. You know, even at best. But also it's just plainly wrong. If you got rid of gender stereotypes, sex stereotypes, the patriarchy, prejudice against women, misogyny, misandry, if you got rid of all of that, you would still get trans people because it's something you're born. And you would get that from talking to any trans people, like almost any trans people. Or talking to the experts and the scientists, you know, or just looking at the evidence. There are trans people born in every single culture in the world. The ones with the strongest sex stereotypes and the ones with the weakest sex stereotypes. There are trans people in places where there is like knowledge about trans people is completely forbidden. And there's like the death penalty on trans people and has been for generations. And there are still trans people born there. And there are actually less trans people that you could, you know, count in those societies than ones with less restrictive gender stereotypes, which wouldn't really make sense from the gender critical point of view. But also, like, no one is spending their life savings and traveling halfway across the world and doing the most traumatic thing you'd ever do in your life, rearranging your genitals because of stereotypes. Like, what are you talking about? The pain that all trans people are describing when they're talking about gender dysphoria that they experience isn't like, oh, I feel so bad and my whole body hurts because I want to wear a dress and I can't. It's like, oh, why didn't you wear a dress then? Oh, suddenly it's all cured and I don't, like, it's just magic. Like, they know that we're talking about trans healthcare all the fucking time, which, like, doesn't fit into this at all, into their idea. It doesn't, like, if being trans was just stereotypes, then we wouldn't benefit from medical transition. We wouldn't even care for medical transition. We wouldn't want it. It doesn't make any sense. And then it also doesn't fit with like other pieces of evidence we have that being trans is something you're born. Like how conversion therapy doesn't work. You would absolutely expect therapy to cure gender dysphoria if it was just a reaction to sexism. Also how, you know, people... twins are more likely to have gender dysphoria if the other one does. They're more likely to be trans if the other one is, even if separated at birth. Like, there is a lot of separate pieces of evidence which all add up to show that being trans is something that you are born with. The fact that we see like gender dysphoria sort of cement itself around adolescence, similar to sexuality, is very telling too. For example, the thing they always love to bring up, how kids with like gender issues when they're very young children often or sometimes don't go on to then be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Like, okay, that's because, you know, sometimes you might think, oh, this kid is showing signs of being gay at a young age, and then they're not, because children change a lot when they're little. But we do know when gender identity and when sexuality kind of, I can't remember what the word is now, but like form or finish developing in human brains, and that is around adolescence. There's just decades of evidence of this stuff, and they just have to just throw it all away. They have to ignore everything. They have to ignore all of what the experts are saying, all of the evidence. They have to ignore every single thing that every single fucking trans person has ever said to them. The amount of times that I've gone up to all of like the big name gender criticals and been like, being trans is not about stereotypes, and here are the reasons why. All of this stuff that I just said now, I've tried every combination of this, of saying it to them. It's not just ignorance. Like, maybe for this person here, it's ignorance. Maybe they have no idea. Maybe no one has gone up to them and said, have you thought about any of this at all for even 5 minutes? Have you ever talked to a trans person? Have you ever actually heard a trans person saying, like, you know, I want this surgery because it cures this dysphoria I have with my body, and I do not give a fuck about gender stereotypes. Like, trans people are less likely to conform to gender stereotypes than cis people are. This makes no sense at all. Anyway, this is a random gender critical person summing up what I think is the gender critical position, but we're also going to look at what some of the big gender critical people said, because quite a lot of them replied to this. We're going to look at all the ones I could find. So this is Rachel Moran, who said 2 things. One was, I know you'd really struggle to understand this, Laurie, but in working class land, no one gives a bollocks about gender identity. 400 likes. Plainly false. Most trans people are working class. Trans people are more likely to be working class than cis people. They're more likely to be homeless than cis people. They're more likely to be unemployed than cis people. Most of my trans friends are working class. Just plainly rubbish. And like most of my real life friends are working class, and like lots of metalheads are. That's, I hang around with all the metalheads, and they all cared when I came out. All of them cared about me as a person. They all wanted to know and ask questions. Then they did. Then we talked about it, and now we just carry on as normal, because like working class people are what? Too stupid to understand? Like too incurious? Like, what are you even trying to say? Ridiculous thing to say. Fucking garbage. What you mean is you don't give a fuck and you want an excuse. She also said, gender critical feminists, I'm liking that you put the quote around feminists as well this time. Like most women, gender critical feminists are not like most women, because most women support trans rights in the UK, and most people who support the gender critical position are men. Anyway, they want to live in a world where male sex offenders are unwelcome in rape crisis centres, domestic violence shelters, and female jails. I want to live in a world where all sex offenders are unwelcome in rape crisis centres and domestic violence shelters. Of course, that is the thing that any trans person who has any opinion on this almost ask them. Do you want any sex offenders in rape crisis shelters? Of course they fucking don't, because loads of trans people have to use these shelters because they're fleeing from sex offenders, and of course she's trying to make the point here that if you let trans women carry on using the services they've been using for decades, then all of a sudden, somehow the people running them won't be able to do their jobs, which is just false and is against what all of the rape crisis shelters are saying. And then she's also said, this is the only actual point that she's made here that's worth discussing, is male sex offenders in women's jails. And there is, of course, it's difficult around where we're placing some prisoners. A lot of prisoners, there's no issue at all. The idea of blanket ban on trans women prisoners from women's jails is ridiculous, because it's all case by case. There are so few trans prisoners, they're able to case by case do a check on all of them to see which prison would be best for them. This already happens. This has been happened for over a decade in the UK. And there's been one instance where a trans woman sexually assaulted someone in a prison. And that was the case when they didn't follow the protocol that has already been in place. So the protocol hasn't actually ever caused problems before. The only problem was when they didn't follow the protocol. But most criminals are non-violent. Most criminals aren't sex offenders. So we're already not talking about those. And of those who are, we shouldn't be putting we shouldn't be putting rapists with their rape victims. We shouldn't be trapping a non-violent criminal cis man in a prison cell with a cis man who rapes men. That's also fucking bullshit. And if there is a trans woman who has raped a woman, trans or cis, then you shouldn't be putting her in a prison cell with the general population of women. Obviously, there's nothing special here, but they're trying to make it a big deal. But this is going to come up a few times here. This is your ideal world. And I mean, I get that they're just trying to cover the gender critical position, and the gender critical position is allegedly like pragmatic political position. It's absolutely fucking not. But like in my dream world, we wouldn't need like these things. Like, I mean, you know, maybe it's an impossible utopia, but maybe if we had really good education and stuff about sexual assault and really good services for everyone involved, then it would be much rarer or wouldn't even happen. But who knows? Anyway, moving on. Sarah Phillimore, who's one of the founders of We Are Fair Cop, who are the Say Yes to Hate people, who on Trans Day of Remembrance, the day that we remember trans people killed by transphobic hatred around the world, they run a campaign called Say Yes to Hate, which is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen a gender critical person do. Anyway, she says, a world where everyone is free to live and love how they wish with consenting adult partners. Great. I am on board. Full agree. I think that every single trans rights activist would say that too. But where reality was recognised and people have reality was recognised. I'm also on board with that. And people with male bodies respected the rights of people with female bodies to single-sex spaces were required for dignity and safety. So, you know, dream world, everyone would already be safe anyway. But looking exactly what she said and taking it straight on, here where she's saying people with male bodies, she includes me, she includes all trans women, you know, whatever level of transition, even if you transition age 4, they are still male bodied, because feel free to go and ask them, but to gender critical people, maleness is just some essence that you have like a conception and you just cannot get rid of with anything. I've asked so many of them what would be needed to actually change sex in your mind, and they all just say it's impossible. Or they'll be like, oh, you've got to change every single cell. It's just like a throwaway comment. I'm like, well, just say we had the technology to change cells' chromosomes. Apparently that's what you care about. What happens if I did it to 51% of a person? Or 49% of a person? Or what happens if I did it to you? Like, what would change? Like, your physical appearance isn't changing. Like, your like brain memories, chemistry, all that kind of stuff isn't changing. Have I just turned you into a man? Like, doesn't make any sense. Anyway, if you drill down, they will just come at you with, you know, everything is a strict binary and nothing can change. So she's just asking to ban all trans women and trans girls, regardless of whether they face misogynistic sexism or not, regardless of whether they're fleeing male violence from an abusive partner or not. She wants all of them banned from women's spaces. And that is just a mainstream gender critical position. Like, to ban all trans women and all trans girls from all women's spaces. I think it's kind of pathetic that they have to hide it behind this language rather than just saying that that's what they want. Because that's the only actual change to the law they want. They don't want to ban cis men and cis boys from women's spaces because, like, you know, that's already the way the world works. The only change they want is to take away the rights that trans women and trans girls have today, and to ban people like me from the spaces we use every single day and have for entire life without any issues. So anyway, 97 likes. I think she used to be more of a bigger deal in gender critical world, and they kind of dropped her. So anyway, Baroness Nicholson has said in response to this, complain to their parents, as always. I have no idea what that means. I cannot give a good faith interpretation, so we will move on. Ruth Sorotka, who is the founder or one of the founders of Women's Place UK, which is the most like respectable mainstream gender critical group, has said there wouldn't be gender identity. So again, this position we discussed at the start, here, like just saying, in my dream world, trans people would go away. That's what's being said here. There would be biological sex where everyone would be free to dress, love, and express themselves in any way they please. Yeah, so same stuff. And now this is a thing which is painfully ironic, and loads of them said, it's so interesting how the other side in this debate understands zilch of our position. They do not listen. Absolutely unreal that she would say this. 400 likes, by the way. I've been coming them at this 4 years to her, to all of them, saying, you think that being trans is a result of the patriarchy, is a result of sexism, and that is false. It would be false if you talk to any trans people. It'd be obviously false if you talk to any trans people. It's also false based on the evidence we have. Here's me listing off the evidence. Your worldview is contradictory. If you start as this is your premise, it doesn't make any sense. All you're saying is, in my dream world, trans people would go away because they're a problem. And like that, when you say we don't understand your position, we know that's your fucking position. We've been saying to everyone, gender critical people want trans people to just go away. And you're like, no, we don't. No, we're not Nazis. We don't want anything like that. They do. And they're saying it out loud. And we've all been saying it for fucking years and coming at them and saying, you want trans people just to go away. And they're like, no, we don't. We care about trans people. Oh, so in your dream world, you'd want us to go away. Which we understood. And then when we actually look at like a bit more of a practical possibility, because you cannot just magically, what are you going to do? Genetically engineer humans so they don't give birth to trans people anymore? Like that's the dream world. Or then you get this like more practical one of ban all trans women from all the spaces. Like that. When someone says what is gender critical, I say it's a group of people who want to ban me from the spaces I use today, take away my healthcare, and who think trans people are just like a product of sexism, which is false. And it's bullshit. And it's all plainly transphobic. And they were like, no, we don't. We just want to protect females. Like, no, you fucking don't. You do not give a shit. On to the next one. Helen Saxby. I can't remember. I feel like she was a bit more central in the gender critical movement before as well. I don't know. Still a recognisable name. The sort of world where children aren't bombarded with gender from the moment they're born, based solely on their genitals. Yes, agree. That sounds good. If here you're talking, well, I mean, yes, that's good. I don't think we need any qualifiers on this. Boys should do this, girls should do this, is bullshit. Fuck off. Like that stuff from Candace Owens earlier, like where she's angry at Gonzo wearing a dress, garbage. And that little Muppets show where they're like, hey, boys can wear dresses too, that's part of fighting against this. That's the trans agenda. Saying, what Helen Saxby wants here in her first little bit. Gender toys, clothes, activities, feelings. Okay, let's just ignore that one for a second. These disappeared. You wouldn't need gender identity in the first place. You'd just be you. I don't need a gender identity. Neither do you. We were born with them because it's part of being a human. Like how we were both born, or we were born with something that's developed into gender identity, and we were born with something that developed into sexuality. That's humans. Born with a handedness too. And so gender toys, clothes, activities, for sure. Absolutely fucking garbage concepts. Anyone should be able to wear any clothes they want. Anyone should be able to play with any toys they want. And anyone should be able to do any activities they want. Like, that is the trans agenda. Again, like, that is absolutely what all of us are arguing for every single day, all the time. as you can see from the American conservatives all complaining at us doing it. And then gendered feelings. I mean, I guess if we say like like good faith interpretation, if we say, for example, compassion is a feminine feeling and anger is a masculine feeling, garbage. Women can both be angry, men can be compassionate. And we should teach people that, because the patriarchy absolutely forces certain emotional responses onto men and women differently. They teaches men that the only way they can react is with anger, otherwise they're not real men. And it teaches women that they have to be compassionate and they can't show rage. Like, for sure. I agree with her on that. When I first read it, I thought she might mean where they claim that being trans is just a feeling. But we won't assume that. But then she does this and explicitly say you wouldn't need a gender identity. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's like saying you wouldn't need a sexuality. Like, I don't need one. I've got one. You've got one. And like, one of the things that gender critical people will often say is, oh, I don't have a gender identity. We've either already seen that or we're about to see that. And this is just nonsense. Like, I can obviously not say to a random person, you have a gender identity, you have a sexuality, you have a handedness. Maybe there's something in their brain that's different to most people and they don't. And I could not know for sure. Absolutely. But we do know that cis people who are forced through transition get gender dysphoria and massively regret it, or, you know, want to transition back. We know that intersex people with certain intersex conditions are significantly more likely to be trans than non-intersex people, especially in conditions where the doctor just kind of guess or just decide that you're male or female based on sometimes what the parents want. And those are way, way more likely to be trans and have gender dysphoria than like the general population or people with other intersex conditions which don't have this thing where the doctor decides whether you're a man or a woman. And, you know, all of this shows that there's evidence for cis people having a gender identity. Plus with all the other things like, you know, they're constantly going on at the idea of like a man transitioning into a woman to win at sports. Like, I am absolutely like arrogantly confident that that will never happen, because absolutely no cis man is ever going to want to transition into a woman. No cis man wants to, like, when you get a group of like, if you go and get a group of 1,000 like people who are like born as boys who are like 18-year-olds or something and say, here, I have this medicine, it's going to make you grow breasts and lose muscle strength and not have erections and be like emotional and stuff, or whatever you want to say are the side effects of, you know, like HRT. One of them in the room is going to be like, oh, and all the rest are going to be like, oh, fuck no. And that one is going to be a trans woman, because, you know, it causes gender dysphoria. Like, they will never honestly analyze this because they can't, because it's part of their ideology to not do this. But if Helen or any of the other people sat down and honestly introspected with themselves, would she want to take testosterone, have her voice drop, grow a beard, get hairy all over, like smell like a man? Does she want that? Would that just be neutral to her? If, imagine they said, oh, you've got this rare disease and you're gonna die unless you take testosterone, and she transitioned and she, you know, she could carry on identifying as a woman if she likes, but she would have to like shave if she wanted, and she would smell like a man, all these things. Would she just be like chill with that? Like, oh, I don't care. Like, body's a body, isn't it? This is my body. You know, that's what gender critical people, of course she fucking wouldn't. None of them would. It would all cause them gender dysphoria. They'd absolutely hate it. They would all, you know, do their best to mitigate the side effects of transition. Like, garbage. Of course they fucking would. They like to pretend that it's all just about clothes and makeup and stuff, and it absolutely is not. Helen Joyce, who is the most recent person to push the transhumanism conspiracy theory in her ridiculous book, which is a cover photo. How can people continue to miss the point this badly? The answer to this question is simple. Any way they like, of course. But we know it's not any way we like, because I like to carry on living my life how I do today, and that involves going to the toilet at work. And loads of gender critical people want to, it's got 1,000 likes. Loads of gender critical people want to ban that. That's like the core position within gender critical. You know, I want to carry on having access to trans healthcare. Women, WHRC, which is a major gender critical organization, and like Janice Raymond wrote it in her book, they want to like get rid of trans healthcare. Just stop it as a thing. And loads, like when they're all saying here, like all the previous people saying, oh, well, in my dream world, gender identity wouldn't exist. So does that mean if someone said, hey, I, for non-gender identity reasons, want to take hormones to change and have surgery to change my genitals, are you okay with that? What, you know, is that an option? What happens if a child is saying, I'm experiencing distress, and you know, want to medically transition, even in the gender critical world where they still have to keep their birth certificate, like Hungary? Well, they're obviously prevented. All the gender critical groups are campaigning against children's trans healthcare, all of them. So it's not live any way we like, of course. Like, the reason that 99% of trans people fucking hate gender critical as a movement is because you want to stop us from living our lives the way we like. Like, you want to take away our healthcare, you want to take away our legal protections, you want to take away, like, our ID. You want, like, as I couldn't go travelling if you took away my passport and made me have an M on it. Like, it wouldn't be safe to go to loads of countries. I couldn't live this life that I live at all if the gender critical movement got its way. And we all fucking know that. They know it too. Garbage. Helen Staniland. There's definitely a lot of Helens in the gender critical movement. The replies to this tweet has many smart and articulate women. There was a lot of gender critical men replying. A lot. Like, go and look. I think I've linked it in the description. I will do. Explaining their position, and some absurd straw men showing that many people vilifying gender critical feminists have zero idea what they're fighting against, including, it would seem, Penny Red. So my reply to Laurie's tweet was, well, we know what gender critical people want because they just say it out loud all the time. And I linked the WHRC declaration, which claims that trans people are like a product of, oh, that's another possible cause of trans people, sissy hypno porn. And that with them saying that they want to ban all trans healthcare, ban all trans women from all women's spaces. Like, that's explicitly what they want. Loads of gender critical people signed their women's declaration calling for the total ban of trans women in women's spaces. Like, we all know that. And that's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against you trying to take away our rights, freedom, and healthcare, and against the idea that trans people are just like the result of sexism, because it's just plainly false. It's false from all of the science. We know you go out of your way to hide this stuff. And then, when you get the chance, you'll fucking say it out loud. Malcolm Clark, one of the founders, early members, not quite sure, of LGB Alliance, says, I would like to be taller, better looking, and wealthier. Well, I'm sorry you're struggling with those three things, Malcolm. I also wouldn't mind being Spanish. or in my 20s either. Okay. You can actually fix the Spanish one, mate. You could just move to Spain and become a citizen. Be a Spanish then. It'd be fun. Should I obsess over the things I am not, or just get on with making the most of what I am? You're encouraging young people to be delusional. 1,300 likes. So here's one of the people that Helen Sandland was just talking about in the replies, who is a man. So what he's doing here is comparing being trans to wanting to be taller or better looking, which is fucking garbage. And this, so Malcolm is, I think, a gay man. And this is just as insulting as if he said, you know, imagine we live in 100 years ago and he's like, I'm in love with this man. I want to kiss this man, have sex with this man, marry this man. I want, you know, I want to do these things that I should be allowed to do. And someone was like, no, I mean, I want to be taller. So why don't you just, you're a man, marry a woman, have sex with a woman. You know, I'm not obsessing over the fact that I want to be Spanish. So why are you obsessing over the fact that you want to kiss a man? Like, plainly insulting, plainly bullshit. You know, I I think most people would like to be wealthier. Okay, lots of people work quite hard to do that, but no one's experiencing gender dysphoria over that, or an equivalent of. It's just plainly bullshit. To say this whole thing is just fucking nonsense. And then you're encouraging young people to be encouraging people to be delusional. Like, what does that even mean? But going around telling people that being trans is the same as wanting to be wealthy, I mean, that's a delusion, or it's just a straight up lie when you've been told otherwise. And you're going around telling young people that. And the difference is that's actually demonstrably bad for them. We know that trans people who don't have healthcare, don't have support from the friends and family around them, don't have, knowledge about what being trans is, suffer for it. Like, that's just something we have the science for, to just plainly demonstrate as being true. And we know that teaching about trans people makes society better. It makes trans people's lives better. It makes everyone else's lives better too. There was a few episodes ago, we actually had a study that showed that. And like, trans healthcare makes trans people's lives better. So like that's encouraging people to be delusional, whereas going around saying that being trans is like wanting to be Spanish. What the fuck are you on about, you stupid knobhead? Bev Jackson, who is another founder of LGB Alliance, says many people don't have a gender identity. Oh, so this is what I was talking about earlier. In the same way, we don't have a religion. There was quite a lot of people comparing gender identity to religion. And this actually comes up quite a lot on the atheist call-in shows I do. And it's like, I think that anyone who's spent any time on like atheist YouTube and absorbing the atheist arguments will see that this is garbage. But religion is something that I would say like is a choice to a degree, but young children are indoctrinated into religions, and lots of people stay in religions that they were born into, and they stay in them for their whole lives, and that is itself an argument against religion, I think. Because how do you know you're indoctrinated into the right one? And everyone thinks they are. Anyway, there are claims that religions make, like, I'm just trying to think of it like a very obvious example. Like the sun rises every day, and they are true. But we can find out that they're true with science as too. Like, we can make a hypothesis, you can use the scientific method and understand how the sun and the planets work and find out that's true. And then there are other claims that religions make, like in 4,000 years Jesus is going to come back. We don't know. Like, there's no way of knowing that until we get to the time limit they've said. And then there are other claims like God is real and influences your decisions and stuff. And we don't know for sure that it's false, but we have absolutely no evidence of it. And we can make, and importantly here, as a worldview, we can make no predictions based on it. If you say, I am going to pray to cure someone from a disease, we cannot get 100 people in a room and pray for someone and predict that they will have a better, or pray for 1,000 people and predict that they will have a better survival rate than 1,000 people who aren't being prayed for. In fact, we can show that there's no difference at all between those two groups. So the claims being made in religion, like prayer works or my God cares about you and you just need to ask for help and stuff, those Like that worldview makes no measurable predictions. Whereas gender identity does make loads of measurable predictions. For example, we can diagnose people as trans and see their lives get better when they have medical transition. And there's a lot of evidence for that. There's constantly more evidence coming out for that all the time. So we can make a prediction based on this. I can also predict Bev Jackson, that if you took testosterone and you grew a beard, you would not like it. And that is a prediction I could make. And it's not necessarily true. Potentially, there is something different about Bev Jackson as a person. So she wouldn't feel any gender dysphoria at all, whatever her body was, man or a woman's, or any combination of like traits. Maybe. Or maybe she's a closet trans man and it would actually make her gender dysphoria go away. Maybe. Who knows? But probably, given the odds, if I had like 1,000 members of LGB Alliance and they were all given HRT, you know, most of them we could predict knowingly with our model of gender identity would get gender dysphoria, because most LGBT Alliance people are straight cis people. Like that's just a prediction we can make. So it's not like religion. Like they're trying to say that it's a blind faith, that being born trans is somehow a blind faith, or it's the same as being born into a religion, and it just demonstrably is not. Like that's just a false comparison. It's not like my opinion. We can actually make testable predictions about transition and stuff that are not analogous at all to testable predictions about religious claims. Probably didn't explain that in the best way. Hope it came across well. Anyway, she also says, we also take the view that identity is a purely personal matter, not requiring anyone else's validation. I mean, you can claim that, but that's also false too. You're in the position where people validate your identity all the time, so you don't have an issue with that. But there are people whose identities are invalidated all the time, and it causes distress. This isn't just trans people. This is just a thing in general. I mean, you can go up to like cis boys and tell them that they're girls, and that will upset them. But also you see this with like, people who are immigrants into countries can be distressed by people saying that they aren't really, they aren't really Spanish. And you can get it in situations where people are a member of a group, or if you're a fan of some musician or some author or something, and then people cast you out, put you in some kind of out group, that can be distressing. Like people there's a whole study of this. That's kind of what sociology is, I guess. Studying people's identities and how humans relate to each other, and validation is an absolute key part of everyone's lives. Only in the gender critical world could you say that and people take it seriously. This is nonsense. We believe it's absolutely fine to be a feminine boy or a masculine girl. Yes, so do I. So do all the trans people I've ever talked to. Of course. But that's a straw man that they have to keep pushing that we don't. Well, I didn't know whether to bother with Lily Maynard. She kind of is. I mean, she's quite outspoken gender critical person. I kind of cringed at the idea of calling her prominent, so don't let that go to your head, Lily. But she says, nobody is assigned male at birth. I mean, that's just plainly false, isn't it? So your question doesn't make sense. Always just got to just try and deflect so you don't have to engage in the point. In the UK and the USA, we are lucky enough to be able to dress how we like without breaking the law. Yeah, we are. But that doesn't mean we can dress how we like without stigma or violence. And actually, sometimes trans people are arrested just for wearing the wrong clothes. There's this thing called walking while trans, where they'll accuse you of being a prostitute just for walking down the street. There's several US states where that's not even illegal to arrest trans women for existing. It does still happen all the time, actually. And also there's like other cases, there's like, I mean, things they complain about all the time, like at Pride, where people wear like fetish or kink gear and they all get leery about it. But we're not having the argument here. Anyway, without gender stereotypes, what do you identify out of or into? Like, without gender stereotypes, there are still men and women, right? And there's still people being born trans and still wanting to medically transition. So ridiculous. TRAs need them to sustain the idea of being trans. No, we don't. Absolutely do fucking not. And she, like, the amount I have told Lily to her, well, not to her face, to her flower, tens of times maybe, that the trans rights movement is generally opposed to gender stereotypes, and that trans people would exist without stereotypes. And the world, in fact, you know, sometimes people say, in a world without gender stereotypes, would there be less trans people? Because maybe there are some trans people whose gender dysphoria is eased just by being able to wear whatever their clothes they want. And that's kind of like the discussion, like, will there be some people today who call themselves trans who wouldn't call themselves trans in a world without sexism? Maybe. But there will probably be a lot more out trans people, because so many trans people are kept in the closet today by the patriarchy, by gendered expectations, by gender critical people who will harass you for looking wrong. That's like one of the main things keeping trans people in the closet. So in a world without sexism, there wouldn't be more trans people, as in the same amount of people would be born who have like gender dysphoria, but there would be more out trans people. Absolutely, there would be no reason to be in the closet, because we've got rid of sexism and the patriarchy, which is where transphobia comes from. So there would actually be more trans people in that sense. So garbage. And again, just to point out that so many of the times they were like, you don't even listen. Oh, here we go. They call us, they attack us, call us bigots, Nazi, TERF, accompanied with various degrees of threats in disguise, and yet they don't have the faintest clue what our positions are. Yes, we do. And it's so painfully ironic for you to say that when you have no fucking idea. None of them have any fucking idea. They haven't ever talked to a trans person. They haven't even thought about it. Attempted to think about it outside of their own nonsense little worldview. Ridiculous. I mean, when all of the mainstream gender critical people are saying, well, in my dream world, trans people simply wouldn't exist. And, you know, that kind of stuff. Or, oh, being trans is just like wanting to be Spanish. Like, why do you think people are calling you bigots and Nazis? We can all just look at your replies to this. I like this one. So we're going to move on after this. I know we've been on this for quite a long time, but I do think it's important to, like, pick the best gender critical arguments to go up against. And I would actually do it a lot more, but lots of, like, I got these by going in on incognito mode, because lots of the gender critical people blocked me because they say something like, being trans is just a stereotype. And then I show up and say, no, it's not. And this is why that doesn't make any sense. And then they block me. And so I don't see their ridiculous fucking stupid takes. But so we'll deal with some of the crapper ones now. So this is from J.K. Rowling's Sergeant Major, saying it's as if she's never heard of J.K. Rowling. I think J.K. Rowling isn't a cult leader in the, like, Charles Manson style cult leader, but she's not a cult leader. There's somewhere in between the two. Definitely something culty going on there. So anyway, this sprang out of that discussion. So this person here says, gender criticals want trans people exterminated. And there was some argument about the language here, like, when you say exterminated, it can kind of sound like put in concentration camps or executed. And for sure, there are some gender critical people who do want that. Absolutely. That's just factually true. We see them all the time. But being good faith and taking them literally at their word, they don't necessarily want to do a violence, but they do want us to just go away. I mean, we just saw loads of them saying that. That was like that was the majority response. Like there were loads of screenshots that you can just go and look, but don't go and pile on or anything, please. So exterminated isn't necessarily the best word, but gender criticals want trans people gone. Like, that's a non-loaded word and it means the same thing. That's what they were trying to communicate here. Anyway, someone says, never seen a person say such a thing. We just want the idea to end, the cult, the ideology, the unnecessary medicalization to end. Gender identity is not innate. So they are just saying here, we want trans people gone. And they're trying to, I've never seen a person say such a thing. Like, firstly, false. There were loads of screenshots of gender critical people saying they want to send us to concentration camps and stuff. But even then, like, you're just doing a word game here, aren't you? Like, someone said exterminated, and that's a bit, like, too... I mean, it's kind of true, but, like, it is a bit, like, over the top, I guess. But then you're just like, oh, we don't want to execute you all. We just want to eradicate you from society. You know, morally mandate you out of existence. That was the, like, TERF mission objective in the 70s, and it still is now, and we can still see it. We can see it with all the last few people. We can see it with this person. Anyway, this person I replied to saying, you want to end trans healthcare and trans rights, but don't think that counts as exterminating trans people. That's pathetic. I mean, we can argue that the word, if you said, hey, exterminate's a bit harsh, we just want to, like, eliminate, then fair enough. Okay, you win the word game. But they come back with gender critical phobia. This is like a classic straight phobia, heterosexual phobia. You know, you're racist to white people, kind of garbage reply. This is kind of embarrassing. But I just thought I'd also literally address this, because often people are like, oh, I'm not transphobic. I'm not scared of trans people. And I'm not going to do that. So phobia is an irrational fear of something, or an irrational aversion to or prejudice against. You can just go and Google what a phobia is. Lots of people think it means just a fear. But, like, you know, I'm afraid of, like, if someone's got a gun, they're pointing at my head, I will be afraid. That isn't a gun phobia. That is a rational fear of the situation. If I am terrified every single day that a gunman's going to run into my room, then that might be an irrational fear. And then it becomes a phobia. Being afraid of trans people or having an aversion to trans people is irrational. It's fucking nonsense. It's demonstrably not a sensible thing to do. It's demonstrably not rational. Therefore, it's irrational. Therefore, it's a phobia. You can't be gender critical phobic because it's rational to be afraid of the people who want to take away your healthcare. Like, and this isn't just like, oh, there's these people out there and oh, they might just burst in and take away your healthcare. Last year, they blocked my healthcare for 6 weeks. They took away the healthcare for children under 16 in the UK. It's completely reasonable to fear these people, and to have I have a rational aversion to gender critical people, as we've just seen from this very person just saying it. Anyway, they went on, and they said, "I'm not going to keep it light or friendly with you. I think you're actively damaging children. You are grooming." Oh, here we go. People to do harm. Grooming them to turn against their parents, grooming them to make life-changing modifications to their bodies. You're 100% the bad guy. And I said, I'm saying, let's follow the science and give everyone the best protections we can. And you're saying we must force our kids to be a certain way and stop them listening to anyone who says otherwise. Which sounds more like grooming to non-cultists, I wonder. And they said, you're a disgusting groomer. Is the level of consent low enough for you yet, you fucking pervert? So this person, incredibly, their account's from 2009. I recognise them a lot. They're a gender critical person. They're definitely like C tier, like they're a nobody, but they've got a few thousand followers and they've been around for a long time. I mean, this is kind of garbage we get all the time for standing up to this crap. Like, they love saying groomer. Ever since Graham Linehan started calling I've forgotten her surname, Grace. Sorry, Grace. Ever since he started calling people groomers, they've all been saying it. And it's just, this is part of the recycled homophobia. They always used to accuse gay people of grooming children to be part of the gay cult or whatever. Like, absolutely copy and paste again. We see it here today. And then they've just tried to shoehorn in this other gender critical point about consent. Like, what are you talking about? We're not discussing consent here. They're just trying to all they're doing is they're saying you're trans, therefore you're a rapist and a pervert. Not even relevant at all. So anyway, this person's fucking loser, like disgusting person. And they just carried on is another example. Like, they said this a lot to me and several other people in the conversation. Hey, Katie, what you're doing to children is grooming and hurtful. You are everything that is wrong with the internet. I hope all the damage you've caused comes home to roost in a very big way. Like, that is a threat. That is absolutely a threat. And it's one of these little coded threats where, Twitter's not going to see it as a threat and they'll claim that that's not what they meant. But that is a threat. And that's the danger of this stuff. Like, if you go around calling trans people perverts and grooming children enough, some random prick is going to kill one of us. That's the goal. It's to scare us. And that's why gender critical phobia is nonsense. It's not a real thing. It's like, this is scary. Getting this stuff. Luckily it's from a random. Imagine if someone with 650,000 followers quote tweeted you calling a groomer when you were like a teacher at a university where people just look up where you worked. It's fucking horrifying. And like, I don't know how that wasn't against the law when he did that. But this person, of course, because of fucking course, they're always worse. They're always even more disgusting than you could possibly imagine. They don't just hate trans people. They don't just send me threats and call me a groomer and all this kind of stuff. This kid says, talking about their mum, she literally told me that she wouldn't be able to love me if I was trans. She mocked my name and just did nothing when my stepdad said he wanted to punch me. And I'm the heartless one? And then this fucking piece of shit says, your mother was trying to get you to see facts. It's extremely difficult for us to see you so brainwashed. We react violently sometimes to this problem. It's just, imagine trying to justify violence against children. Like, even if your child was in a cult, that wouldn't justify violence against them. That is bad parenting. It's disgusting. It's child abuse. You must see that she was destroyed by your belief in this nonsense. She would have tried anything to stop you. Apologize to your mother and stepdad who wanted to punch you. What are you fucking talking about? Like, this is what brainwashing looks like. It's fucking disgusting. We're going to move on. I've been going quite long. I don't know how long this episode is already. Quite long. It's all right. We're getting through it. There's not loads more, but there is some more. Right. So, Vagina Museum is a museum in London dedicated to vaginas. And they committed the cardinal sin of talking about trans people's vaginas. And so the gender critical movement absolutely hates them, even though they're a feminist organisation. What a surprise. Who would have guessed that the gender criticals would hate a feminist organisation? I bet that's never happened before. So I'm not going to read all this out. They did a long thread about it and I have linked it in the description. Basically, the people who they rent the building off to have the Vagina Museum in has said, we're not going to have you anymore. It's not political. I think they probably want to sell it for flats or whatever. You know, who knows? So they're looking for a new place. So please go and read the thread. And if you can help them by donating, or if you happen to own a space that would house the Vagina Museum in London, then hit them up. So Glasgow Women's Library, who are another feminist organisation, said, can anyone help Vagina Museum find a new home? And the gender criticals did not like that because it's another feminist organisation who in this case, indirectly supporting trans people because they're supporting another feminist organization that supports trans people. Anyway, here's someone with a, some gender critical dog whistle thing saying, not a chance. They don't want to help the Vagina Museum. Like, what? Because, I mean, I haven't actually been to the Vagina Museum because I only found out about them in lockdown, and I was planning to go after lockdown. And now they're having to move. I think they're there till the 1st of September, so maybe I'll get a chance. There's not much time left. Go if you can. It is free. And, just because it has, on Twitter, supported trans people, I don't know if they do in the actual display, they all want them to shut down. I thought this was a good example of it. Glasgow Women's Library, no thank you. So hashtag no thank you is their new little dog whistle. It's not a very good one, so I don't think it's going to last as long as some of the others, but it's their new thing. And Vagina Museum, no thank you. Yeah, so just imagine a world, just trying to explain this to people. These people who claim to be feminists want Glasgow Women's Library and Vagina Museum to shut down. For some reason. Because... So, this is in some shit newspaper. Not sure which one. So, this is obviously written by a gender critical person. And I just want you to clear your mind and just imagine that you're just a random cis person with no trans friends, no trans relatives. You've never watched TERF Wars. You haven't really been paying attention to the news. You've got your own things going on. And you read this column. The Vagina Museum may soon be homeless. So no beating about the bush. Any bright ideas for new premises? Camden Market isn't renewing its lease, but has offered space on the top floor, which the museum staff say will feel like vulvas are being shoved to the top shelf. Yes, those mucky mags and the newsagents still sell amazingly, despite the free internet porn. Go figure that. That's terribly written. But no silly suggestions like Crotch Crescent in Oxford, please, because life never works out this splendidly. It would add to the gaiety of the nation if it could be homed in, say, Fanny Hands Lane, Lincolnshire, or Fine Bush Lane, Ruislip, but the Killjoys would get in a flap. So, I was fairly decent. The museum, so this is the mad bit. The museum might have enjoyed more help if it hadn't angered so many women by using phrases such as people with vaginas. Have you considered identifying as a penis museum? Wrote one on Twitter. Hilarious. But let's think positively. For I think I have the perfect address for a new birth. It's Lady Lawn in Somerset. You're welcome. So I didn't need to read all that bullshit out, really, did I? Just this bit. The Vagina Museum might have enjoyed more help if it hadn't angered many women. The Vagina Museum, by saying phrases such as people with vaginas. The Vagina Museum. I've never said the word vagina so much in my life. Just trying to explain that to your uncle at Christmas. Like, what the fuck is going on? How is this the real world? How have they managed to con enough people in the UK media, or, it's written by a gender critical person, into writing this kind of fucking garbage? How are people reading this and being like, oh yeah, that makes sense? What world? The Vagina Museum has closed down, so I have resorted to something known as a letter. Oh, the closed down comments. So I've resorted to something known as a letter with a stamp. And they've written, this normal person has done a normal thing by writing a letter saying, I was delighted when the Vagina Museum opened. You were brave enough to challenge the shame hanged upon women for generations around their bodies. Yes. But your suggestion that women no longer use words that refer exclusively to female anatomy in a bid to be inclusive includes only men who felt left out because they don't have vaginas. The Vagina Museum isn't talking about men or even trans women who don't have vaginas. It's about vaginas. So there's nothing to do with trans women who don't have vaginas. What are you talking about? Women who are so disgusted by their own bodies that they embark on drug regimes and operations to obliterate them. It's just transition, mate. And lots of trans men have vaginas. And the Vagina Museum has also talked about them. I'm not a person who menstruates anymore, so your label excludes me and millions of other women. Then you're not the person who they're talking about when they say people who menstruate, are you? So yes, you are excluded by that label because it's not you. If they were talking about women, they would say women and they would mean you. And if they were talking about people with vaginas, that's what they would say and they would mean you. And if they're talking about people who menstruate, that's what they would say and it wouldn't mean you. That's the whole point in these phrases, because they're different groups. Not all women menstruate, not all women have vaginas, not all people with vaginas are women, not all people who menstruate are women. Like, these are all different Venn diagrams and they largely overlap. And when we're talking about structural prejudice, sometimes it's important to recognise that it's targeted at people because they're women, regardless of whether they menstruate or not. But like, it's fucking nonsense. Ugh. You're the only museum dedicated to vaginas in the world, but it seems that any exclusively female project must be dismantled to centre the wishes of men. Like, what are you talking about? Fuck off. Stupid. Right, onto the brain rot. Hoist by your own petard, Darren. So this guy's talking to someone called Darren. As you can tell, people like you are like this is going to be tricky to read. Hoisted by your own petard, Darren. People like you always are. Katie should stick to her self-selected, gender-appropriate activities. Hate baking and wearing bad lacquer. Lectures on misogyny from you lot. Haha. Stomping around your basements like you rent the place. Happy days. What does this mean? I can't decode this. There's a lot of hyphenated things here. Self-selected gender-appropriate activities. Like, is there some comment about me? Like, what's self-selected? What does that mean? Like my hobbies? Like, they're the self-selected activities I have. Like, you're trying to say that they're like hate baking. What's hate baking? And are you trying to make some kind of comment about this being like some like female only activity, like baking is for women or something? But I do hate baking. What? I have actually done hate baking, I think twice in my life. One time when Amanda Jeanette Knox said that they wouldn't ever eat kiwi on a pizza, so I made a kiwi pizza and said fuck you Amanda on Twitter. And the other time was when Girl Who Draws Ghosts, who you should all go and follow, said something about a lasagna pie, and so I made a pie with a lasagna in it, so fuck you as well, you should go and follow her. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's hate baking maybe, but I also love both of them. Wearing bad lacquer, I don't even know what that means. Stomping around your basements like you rent the place. I mean, I presume that lots of people with basements do rent the place, but some of them own it. Anyway, Alien Head also had this little nonsense. Oh, not little nonsense, misogynistic nonsense. So a cis woman says, if you say so, laughing face, whatever, and then Alien Head says, exactly, like you three, including me, unaffected by other people's reality. What does that mean? I am affected by other people's reality. I'm affected by all reality. Good luck living your lives. I struggled for mine. What have you all done? Yeah, we've all struggled too, mate. Everyone's struggled to some degree. I mean, you might have struggled more. Fair enough. And then this lady says, how do you know I have never struggled? And then he said, gender critical man, defender of women, says, you've struggled for Johns. I can see that much. So for anyone who doesn't know, a John is the name for a man who hires sex workers. So just cracking out misogyny here, just accuse it like... We can all see that's misogynistic. Move on. Oh, this is some fucking weirdo. So this guy, who's another gender critical man, messaged me and said, I've not purchased my copy of Helen Joyce's book yet. And then few hours later saying, I've placed an order at the bookshop. It'll be with me by midweek. And then like 2 days later was like, I've obtained my copy. Like they had just tagged me in Helen Joyce's tweet saying this. And I think what they were trying to do was like stress me out and make me feel bad that like people are buying this bullshit anti-trans book. But like if you're doing this already, mate, it doesn't stress me out because you're already a fucking cultist anyway, aren't you? So I'm not sure you buying the book really matters to me. It's kind of just came across really needy and cringe. Like, hey, Katie, look, I'm going to buy this book. And I'm like, oh, I've nearly bought the book. I've ordered it. Like, oh, I've got my copy of the book. Okay. I don't care. Anyway, so I was like, okay. Maybe read some Jennifer Billock afterwards and see if you can see any similarities. Have you read a book about trans people that was written by someone who has ever talked to a trans person or an expert? Or maybe written by an actual trans person or expert? Of course, full deflection here. Ms. Joyce assures us that Ms. Joyce assures us that her work can be falsified by the third gamete. Like, I don't care what she assures you her work can be falsified by. I mean, the bit about all the billionaires who just happen to be Jewish can be falsified without gametes at all. Most of her book is just plainly garbage, so it can be falsified in many different ways. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I said, I don't think falsifying her work is much of an issue. And then this fucking creeper said, perhaps you and I might falsify Ms. Joyce's work by starting a family of our own, Katie. You fucking sleazeball. It's just so disgusting. Gender critical men do this all the time. They're like, trans women can't experience misogyny. And now I'm just going to use misogyny as a tool to make your life worse. All the fucking time. Oh, it's just so... look at this. I didn't even clock the second bit. Ms. Joyce would have to agree to be the glorious grandmother to our firstborn. Oh, you fucking sleaze. It's so disgusting. Leave me alone. Another hashtag no thank you. Latest dog whistle. Look out for it. Starting to be people's names. We need to go through and track all of these and like put them on a graph or something. If anyone's interested in doing that. Getting all the gender critical dog whistles and seeing how much they show up and die down. Nobody is saying trans people don't deserve healthcare or rights. Nobody. Of course, nobody's saying that. Just the whole fucking gender critical movement. But mutilating a healthy body because affirmation is the only option for a dysphoric person isn't trans healthcare. It's medical malpractice. And what's right just don't you have anyway. Like, nobody's saying I want to take away your healthcare. I just want to take away your healthcare. I just don't even think that your healthcare is real healthcare. I don't think you should be able to have it. So I am an example of the very person I said didn't exist at the start of the tweet. Standard gender critical. This is a good one. People don't have a right to be offended at everything. Okay. To put it another way, they can be offended at anything they want. Okay. Well, that's one direct contradiction. Let's see what else the tweet says. It's irrelevant. Context matters. It's only offensive if it's meant to be, which it wasn't. So what you're saying is the context doesn't matter. So you don't have a right to be offended at anything, but you can be offended at anything. The context matters, but the context does not matter. Thank you for clearing that up with me, person, gender critical man. Thank you very much for clearing that up with me. So the standard argument about sexuality, where gender critical people claim that people are attracted to gametes or chromosomes, is nonsense. So I said, what are you on about, mate? No one is attracted to stereotypes. Equally, no one is attracted to gametes. Come on. And then hashtag proud TERF hero says, you can look as you wish or try to pretend to be, but that does not mean I have to like trans anatomy. I mean, you don't have to like any anatomy. I feel like if you specifically don't like trans anatomy, whatever that means, trans anatomy, I mean, then you're transphobic. Maybe if you're singling out like... Anyway. I, gender critical man, do not speak for you. Talking to a woman. I speak for my wife and daughter. No, you don't. Your wife can speak for herself. And even though she may well be a child, your daughter can speak for herself too. And you know, statistically, both of them are a lot more likely to support trans rights than you are. Because they're women and girls. And statistically, women and girls support trans rights. So please don't speak for them. Because if all men spoke for the women in their lives, then we would get the idea that most people are transphobic. And that's part of the problem. Because that's exactly what men are fucking doing. And that's what all of the anti-trans movement is. Fuck off. By the way, I live in France. And in French, all nouns are gendered. So that means I will quite happily use the pronoun elle to refer to a table or a car. But I avoid using she to refer to trans-identifying males. So what you're saying is, you don't give a fuck, and you know that pronouns are just part of the gender construct, but you just want to offend trans people. That's it. That's what you're saying. You just want to gender police people. We know. We know, mate. It also said they lived in London on their profile, so I think they're making it up. Oh, so one gender critical person called me homophobic for saying that sexuality is based on what you can sense. And then we had an argument. And I'm not going to show that because that gender critical person in particular has said that they will call into the Transatlantic call-in show. They were going to call in yesterday, but I couldn't be on the show for reasons. And so they're going to call in not next week because I'm not on, but the week after. And we're going to start from scratch. So I'm not going to call them out. However, I am just going to highlight this gender critical person who showed up in the comments where I was being called a homophobe, saying, during the debate about changing the definition of marriage, many of us had reservations because of the slippery slope the issue would open the door to. We've been proven right quicker than any of us imagined. Now, in Finland, a politician is facing jail time for expressing her belief that marriage is between a man or a woman. A professional footballer in Australia was fired for quoting the Bible. All over the Western world, gender fluidity is being taught in schools to young children. This is what we're talking about, the gender critical movement. So much of it is like this. Changing the definition of marriage. What are you on about? It's the same argument. You're trying to change the definition of women. You're trying to change the definition of marriage. No, fuck off. That isn't the case. There should never have been a legal definition of marriage. Never. Which was exclusive to straight people. And in the past, in other cultures, that wasn't the case. You homophobic people changed the definition of marriage, and we wanted to change it back to what it should be. To what it is in, you know, common. Anyway, moving on. Oh, this was very weird. So this was in the fallout of the gender criticals claiming that Terry Pratchett would have been gender critical, and then his daughter and like friends and colleagues were like, what the fuck off. And then so Neil Gaiman was discussing it, and then they were talking about Graham Linehan, and Neil Gaiman says, I'm worried about Graham's mental health. How is that confidential? He's talked to Parliament about his monomania, how his monomania has cost him his marriage. And then this person has quote tweeted and misread monomania as monoamorous. And they've said, I've never known a single polyamorous man that wasn't narcissistic megalomaniac. Like, that is not relevant, but it got 151 likes. And then, so in reply to that, when Neil Gaiman has said he's worried about Graham's mental health, this person has replied, Graham Linehan is profoundly sane. Profoundly. Is that what we're calling monogamy these days? Monomania. What? I hope no one ever has to jump in to call me profoundly sane. Just a little bit suspicious. Have you seen the male-female pelvis? Also, fun fact from the Bible. Females have less ribs. There are multiple differences between male and female skeletons. Male and female skeletons have different number of ribs, do they? Maybe look it up next time, mate. Maybe Google it. Maybe before you come in with some arrogant, maybe look it up. Like, I do this sometimes. Sometimes someone says something stupid and I'm like, why don't you fucking look it up, mate? But before I do that, I always just look it up just to check, just in case I self-own this hard. If you Google do men and women have a different number of ribs, the answer is no. I thought that's quite a funny one. Another gender critical man, of course. Oh, okay. I was going to spend longer on this one, but I'm not because we're running out of time. So I've said same-sex attracted community is a dog whistle. As a phrase, it's a dog whistle that the gender criticals are trying to use to say that sexuality is based on birth sex and not the actual observable reality of your life, which is, I mean, it's true that it's a dog whistle, and it's also true that sexuality is based on what people can sense and not on their gametes or their genitals they had when they were born or chromosomes. But they will have to pretend I'm saying something I'm not because they don't have an argument against it. So this person is like, this person says, the irony is Katie is suggesting that if a man isn't observably male enough, then they are less attractive to gay men. Effeminate gay men be damned, typical homophobia. So, firstly, in your world, where all trans women are men, yes, I am saying that. Because if someone reads as a woman, then gay men aren't going to be attracted to them. But then they're trying to then conflate that with effeminate gay men. But that isn't what I've said. Because that's a totally different group. So, no. That's nonsense. Fuck off. We don't have to justify common sense to you. We don't have to justify our science. Everyone can see with their own eyes that men are stronger than women and have always had faster records. The standard. You do have to justify, I said, you do have to justify your position or it's worthless. I justify all of mine all the time. And we're not talking about cis men. Always. Their argument for why trans women shouldn't be in sports is because cis men are faster than cis women. So what? Even if trans women are men in your eyes, they're still a different group and they perform differently, so those statistics don't mean anything in this discussion. And their response isn't defending why they, don't have to justify their positions. They just said, cis doesn't exist. Because you've got to deflect every possible moment. If you've got a chance to deflect and drag the conversation out into something else, then do it, because that's the best way, because then you never have to justify anything you've said. And I thought this is a perfect example of that. What is this one? I think I'm going to skip ahead just because we're running out of time, and we will come back to those next. But this is a new feature that I wanted to do. So we're coming to the end now. Thank you very much for everyone sticking by. It's been quite a long episode. I wasn't expecting it to be this long, but I've had quite a lot of energy for it, and we went through a lot of mainstream gender critical people's positions earlier, and I think that's quite important. But so this is my new feature, YouTube comment of the week. So I am going to, if we get any good comments, if you would like to write good comments or shit comments, we can do some shit comments of the week too. If you would like to write a comment, you're totally welcome, and maybe I'll highlight it in the next episode. And this was a really good comment from Chaos and Sandale. who was doing a joke about the person who said there are no pronouns in the Bible or whatever they were saying next week. You know, they've always got an issue with pronouns. And they've done a take on this. First, they came for the socialist poem. So I'll just read it out. They said, first they came for the pronouns, and I did not speak up because I had no clue what pronouns are. Then came for the articles and prepositions, and did not speak up because had no clue articles and prepositions are. Then came conjunctions, and did not speak because had no clue conjunctions are. Then came verbs, did not speak, had no clue verbs are. Then nouns, not no clue nouns. Then not know. Rest in peace, Indo-European languages. I thought that was quite clever. But that is the last of today's things to look at. And I did say I was going to open mailbox, but I'm actually not going to because it's been 2 hours, and I will do it next episode if the episode doesn't run on. And if not, I'll do a special mailbox episode sometime next week. Thank you for sticking by me for 2 hours. And for everyone who's in the UK, thank you for staying up until midnight because it's actually quite late for a work night. If you have any suggestions on time or anything to better work around, I'd love to hear them, but I think it's okay. But anyway, I think that today's episode was good. I was, as usual, worried that we weren't going to have enough material and as usual had too much stuff. I think it was important to look at what the gender critical people actually think. Like when they're saying what their worldview is out loud, it is we want to get rid of trans people. And then they go and say that we don't listen to them. We fucking listen to them, and that's why we're scared of it, and they don't listen to us, and that's why they claim things like gender identity is a product of sexism. So yeah, I think it's important to look at the best arguments too. So tell them all to call into the Transatlantic Call-In Show. I know that this week's episode is going to be, I think, Arden with Sam Collins. I'm pretty confident of that, and that will be really good. So that's going to be the first trans man we've had on the show, and you should all check it out. I actually think it's not going to be on Saturday, so check out the listing on the YouTube, and also check out Arden's Twitter if you want to find out more about that, and I will tweet about it too. But I'm off on my second holiday this year. This week I'm going to go to a music festival, which is exciting. Now I've been double vaccinated. You have to do all the tests and stuff to get in. But it's going to be good, hopefully, assuming I test negative. Yeah, thank you very much for sticking around, everyone. I really appreciate everyone watching this show and sharing it with all your friends who might want to learn about this stuff, or who might be stressed about the TERF wars and want to see people dunking on the arguments. Bring them in. And mad thanks to everyone who's done a super chat. Thank you so much. I know I don't get to them on this show. I genuinely really appreciate it. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and I will see you next week.